Hello, I'm Nicholas Thompson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Wired. You may have seen me in that video just a second ago with much shorter hair. I haven't cut my hair since quarantine began, and here we are. But thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us at this year's Wired 25. And watching that video, it makes me nostalgic for the last 2 years. Commonwealth Club, SF Jazz, sitting right next to people, touching the little robots, running on the Embarcadero. It was amazing. But I'm glad we are here. I'm glad we get to do this. And I'm glad we get to do this at such an important time, in a moment where we're dealing with so many crises, where we have the pandemic, where we're sorting through election, questions of trust, where we have a long overdue reckoning over racial justice, where there are fires. And it is moments like this where it feels particularly important to have an event like WIRED25, because the point of WIRED25 is to start conversations and meet people who are using the awesome powers of tech and the incredible powers of science to make the world better, to take a look at these problems and to try to use tech to solve them. That's what we do at WIRED25, where we start conversations on these stages, we continue them on our website, and it is at dark moments like this where it feels particularly necessary. So I'm glad you're here, and I want to thank our sponsors, Samsung and Vonage, who by supporting this event have made it free for everyone online. I guess the one good thing about it being online is it makes it a lot easier to book people from all over the place, because they don't have to travel. So this year we have speakers from France, Germany, Israel, Mexico, the Philippines, Scotland, and Taiwan. All across the United States as well. We have San Francisco, Boston, Seattle, LA, DC, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Santa Cruz, Palo Alto, and Hammond, Louisiana. The youngest is 17, the oldest is 79. And so for the next 2 weeks, starting today, and then the next 2 Wednesdays, we're going to talk about all these pressing, intractable, complicated issues, but issues where technology, science, and people with ideas can actually bring us forward. Tonight, we're going to focus on cultural innovators and artists. We have an incredible lineup, people doing extraordinary things. You'll be impressed with every single conversation. And I am, of course, very excited for the first one, which is with Reid Hastings, CEO of Netflix. I first interviewed him 17 years ago. I was writing a story. I was a young reporter. I was writing a story for the New York Times. And the question animating the story was whether this new startup with the little thin red envelopes could defeat the challenge of Blockbuster and Walmart. And turns out they did pretty well. They've done all right. And in fact, it's only been 7 years since they launched their first original series, House of Cards, and they're heading into this weekend's Emmys with 160 nominations. Shows like Ozark, The Crown, Stranger Things. They have deals with incredible super producers, Ryan Murphy, Barack Michelle Obama, Prince Harry, Meghan Markle. Obviously, this company has done pretty well and done a lot of interesting cultural things since I first wrote about them way back when. So how did this all happen? What is Reid Hastings' secret for running the company? He has just published a book, which I have read. I'm going to ask him a whole bunch of questions about it. So let's get started. Hello, I'm back, and I'm here with Reid Hastings. Reid is the co-founder, the chairman, and the co-CEO of Netflix. He's also the co-author of No Rules Rules, a riveting new book that I have just completed. You have probably spent more time, perhaps indirectly, with Reid than anybody else except your immediate family since March. So, welcome, Reid Hastings. How are you? Welcome to WIRED25.
We are so thrilled to provide entertainment for all that time and to give people a little escape. And after working for 3 years on this book, it's going to be fun to talk about.
It's going to be great to talk about. So, Reid, I read through your book. It's got lots of wonderful stuff about culture, about dynamics, about how you built Netflix, about how you manage people. WIRED25 is mostly about how technology improves the world, how it makes us live more fulfilled lives. So I want you to talk a little bit about the reason for Netflix, the moral purpose of Netflix, and how the culture of Netflix affects it.
So let's see, the book, No Rules Rules, is really about keeping a culture innovative as you grow. So I think that's the big tie-in for your theme is most companies have a burst of innovation, the startup phase, and then there's a phase of harvest, and then they're rarely able to continue to innovate. And that was also true of my first company, Pure Software. So what we're doing at Netflix is trying to show if you set aside the rules, if you really focus on the people over process, that you can continue to innovate at a great place, at a great pace, and have an incredibly creative environment that's fun and satisfying. To think about Netflix independent of that culture, for a sec, you asked about the purpose. Our purpose is to entertain the world, to provide people around the world the most phenomenal entertainment service they've ever seen. And we do that by producing all over the world. So we produce in Spain, in Germany, in Japan, in Korea, in the UK, in Brazil, of course, a lot in the US. So think of it as we want to produce content everywhere and share that around the world. And some of the most fantastic stories come from other places. And really what that helps do is connect people. So if you're a globalist, like I am, you want to knit the world together. And you want people to understand, respect, love, and appreciate each other. And entertainment is a key part of how that happens. And so we are so excited when we have a hit that people all around the world are enjoying together.
And that's a really interesting and important idea, particularly in 2020, as the politics of the world become more nationalist, and particularly as the tech sector splits, right? As we split into a Western tech sphere and an Eastern tech sphere. Do the current dynamics of global politics make this mission of yours more prevalent? And does it change the way you think of specific types of content that cross borders?
You know, I have to stop you. It's not really splitting Eastern and Western. It's splitting Chinese and non-Chinese. I mean, India, Korea, Japan are all...
I was trying to be generous about it, but yes, you are correct.
I mean, there's a very specific... tragic, separation of China from the rest of the internet. But the whole rest of the world, it's possible for Netflix to, we got this great story out of Korea, Crash Landing on You. And, it's this romantic comedy, but it involves North Korea and North Koreans. So like the tensest border in the world. And then here's this romantic comedy between South Koreans and North Koreans. Or a film we have out of Japan, series, Naked Director, that's about sexual expression in Japan, which is a relatively repressed place. So whether it's the East, whether it's the West, it's really about storytelling for us.
Tell me about how your culture has transitioned as you become more of a global company, because you say that maintaining culture gets harder as a company gets larger and as it spreads across the globe. So you created a culture in Silicon Valley for Silicon Valley people, and it is now a culture for a massively global company whose moral purpose is global in certain ways. Explain that tension.
Early days, we were DVD shippers, and mostly in Silicon Valley. And my co-CEO, Ted Sarandos, would travel from LA up to Silicon Valley every week. And then about 10 years ago, we pivoted to really become an entertainment company with House of Cards, Orange is the New Black. And now I commute to LA every week for a couple of days. Okay, so we're really much more LA centric. And we used to have worries about, Silicon Valley versus Hollywood and those cultural tensions. And the great thing about going international is then, our Brazilian and German colleagues would laugh at us and say, you're all Californians. You are so profoundly American, and there's no real difference. And the big difference is between, the Californians and the Dutch and the French. And, we've worked really hard to build community between our different employee groups and connection. And I think we've done a good job of that. A particular example is in feedback. So U.S. cultures tend to be very direct, very verbal, and Japanese cultures, because they're very sophisticated, tend to be able to communicate indirectly very well. They call it reading the air. And if we're both Japanese, I can say I'm unhappy with this activity, but I never have to say it verbally. My cues are so precise and well-tuned that I'm confident you got the message, even without the words. Now, of course, cross-culturally, when Americans are involved in that, it doesn't really work that well. We don't, understand the air. We misinterpret. Why didn't they say what they meant? All those kinds of misunderstandings. And just as we use English as a standard language around the world, it's no better or worse than other languages, but it is very functional. We've adopted the American more verbal feedback style, and our Japanese colleagues have been willing to adapt to that when dealing with non-Japanese. So that's a case where the California style is sort of the global style for us. Now, another example is Americans build trust through doing tasks together. So we would be like some project, okay? And we don't like the chit-chat. We see that as kind of inefficient, and let's get to the point. We're very efficient focused. And Brazilians are very relationship oriented. So they want to go and have dinner and not talk about work exactly, talk about family and sports and religion and society and form a relationship and get to know each other. And then they work in the office very effectively. And we realized, wow, the Brazilian approach actually works better because you've got deeper relationships and it allows feedback to be much more trusting and helpful. So it's the combination of the Brazilian relationship style combined with later the direct feedback that has been really effective for us. And so we've, really promoted the Brazilian style relationship investment. And we do a lot throughout the company to invest in relationships, not talking about core business issues. So that's an example, again, where the Brazilian style seems to be the best, and we've standardized on that globally.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that there's a core Netflix culture that is adapted and shifted a little bit as you move into different countries. The core Netflix culture is pretty intense, right? Constant feedback, as you said. You have this famous line that adequate performance gets a generous severance package, right? People should constantly be checking whether everybody who works for them is the very best and if they would fight to keep them if they got a competitive offer. That's tough stuff. And does that work
It's fantastic stuff because you get to work with incredible colleagues. Look, we're more honest about it, but we're not like the first company to think about that. It's just we're super direct about it. And we say, look, the traditional model for a company is a family. And in a family, you stick with your brother no matter how dysfunctional, okay? And the other model is a sports team, okay, a professional football team. And with that, it is high performance. You're never going to win a championship unless you've got great players in every position. And so we model ourselves on how does a professional team work, and they care about each other. They're very close. The only difference, of course, is Netflix is not fixed 11 people. As we get more great people, we get to grow. And that's a big difference. So you don't have people competing, for the only tight end position, that's there. So, but again, that's the family versus team. But I think the big difference is that at Netflix, we're very honest about who we are and what we're trying to be. And for people who value peer excellence and they value learning, we're incredible. For people who primarily value job security, then we're not a great match, and there's no judgment in that, and people will select out and go to a different firm.
So I'm very much related to this, in fact, directly related to something you said. I want to read you my favorite sentence in the entire book, which I enjoyed beginning to end. One of the things I was interested as I was reading it is how you would compare your culture, where everybody's evaluating employees constantly, to the old Microsoft culture of stack rankings. And in fact, you address it directly. And there's an employee, and he's an engineer, and he was quite successful as an engineer. And then he moved into more of a role where he had to talk to people as part of user testing. And that was uncomfortable. And he asked his manager. His manager said he wasn't good at it. So he trained. And this is what he wrote. The day of my first Netflix presentation, I got up at 6 a.m., unicycled for 4 hours, took a shower, and walked directly into the meeting room for my 11 a.m. presentation. And it's a good story about both the kind of person who works at Netflix. He's unicycling for 4 hours and the pressure to perform and to respond to feedback. So tell me a little bit more about whether there were lessons you learned from other Silicon Valley companies that had stack rankings in competitive systems and how you managed that.
Jack Welch from GE pioneered it, and he said managers don't like to get rid of people. So I have to force them to by having every manager has to fire 10% of the people every year. And that's an incredibly crude and destructive approach, because what you do is you don't want to help your colleagues, because then they'll be potentially above you, because you're graded on this curve where 10% of the people are forced out. So I think that's horrific. And Microsoft Stack Ranking, which they've now gotten rid of, has some of the same dynamic. It didn't include, the bottom 10% gets fired, but, it was fixed ratios. So we want a manager to hire all great people, so they have no one, who's not performing. And to do that, we ask them to just apply the keeper test, and it's the manager's judgment. They may say, I would absolutely keep this person. They're not that good at this function, but at these, they're incredible. But it's manager judgment. We're definitely a company to lean into judgment. I know we're thought of as data, and Silicon Valley is about data. And we do use data for some things, like consumer testing on the service of what features work better. But we're also very embracing of human judgment and of refining that judgment, including, how to help our people do well.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about data for a second, because it's a topic of Netflix that has always interested me. I edited a story at Wired maybe 13 years ago about, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was like just a guy in a garage who was zooming up the Netflix challenge, creating a new algorithm for recommendations and beating all, the teams from MIT. It was a wonderful story. Tell me how the recommendation algorithm, which is core to Netflix, has evolved over time, both in the inputs it considers and in the outputs it wants to achieve.
Well, the whole field has evolved quite a lot with deep learning, and that's become the primary set of techniques. All the techniques of that very fun Netflix contest, 13 years ago, are not in use at Netflix or at other firms. So many big advances in deep learning have propelled us and the whole field forward. And we're constantly trying to figure out, how do we provide you a set of great choices and learn what new things you might be interested in. Suppose you took a recent trip to Korea. And we don't know that, of course. And so every now and then we want to put a Korean drama in front of you as a recommendation to see, are you interested in, expanding into these new areas of content? And so sometimes when you get a bad recommendation, that's actually us trying to probe the edge to sort of see what new things might you be interested in.
You literally don't know if someone took a trip to Korea. You're not buying data, geolocation data, or Facebook login data, or data from across other platforms. You're only using first-party data?
So just be totally clear, we buy no data. We don't sell any data. We're a complete isolated data island. It's just what preferences you have had, what shows your account has watched, compared with other anonymous accounts at Netflix.
But let's take the Korea example, just because privacy is such an important conversation right now. I travel to Korea. I log into Netflix while I'm in Korea, and I watch an American film. Presumably, you see the Korean IP address. Do you then factor it into my recommendations and give me Korean films as a potential recommendation?
That's a potentially good idea, but no, to my knowledge, we don't do that yet. There's not enough international travel, except of a very narrow group of people. But the point is that we really want to get you beyond, nobody wants a film just like the one you watched last night. Okay, so the one you watched last night was great, but then you want to find, something else that's, different. We want something that's fresh.
Yeah, let's stick with the data question for a second, because it leads to one of the things that I've wondered a lot about Netflix in the last year, which is that if you look at the tech backlash, the backlash that's been since 2016, it's hit a lot of your peer companies. It hit Facebook hard while you were on the board. It hit Google to a certain degree. It hit Microsoft, like some strange degree. It's even hit Tesla, but it hasn't hit Netflix. And is that because you're not really a tech company? You're not a platform. Obviously, you're disruptive and you use tech. Is there a difference there? Is it because you're not influencing American democracy, you're just influencing American culture? Explain why the tech backlash hasn't come for you yet.
Well, one, we don't have advertising. And once you have advertising, you're incented to import lots of data and learn everything you can and around not just entertainment taste, but a broad range of things. So fundamentally, from the business model, we have a much simpler business model, which is, thank you for your $15 a month and then provide you great entertainment. Second, we're fundamentally an LA company, that does incredible tech. And our biggest competitors are Disney Plus and HBO Max. Okay, so, our competitive set, our core, 2/3 of our spending is on content, out of LA. We're not, really in the core of the, Google, Facebook tech orientation or even culture.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about Netflix culture, sometimes you put it in a historical context and you say that most companies were organized based on a factory model and Netflix was organized differently. And what interests me when I hear you talk about that is it suggests that at some point, society will evolve in a way that your model will become obsolete or that you'll have to really evolve your model, that it will no longer be right? If other companies are using an out-of-date model, then at some point you will. How will you know when that moment comes?
Well, think of EA or Pixar as other companies that are doing both tech and entertainment and using tech for great entertainment. And so we're like that for series and films. And when we look at the future and say someday series and films may be like the novel or the opera, sort of a very small art form, what are the things that might outcompete movies and series? So one would be user-generated content like YouTube or TikTok. Another might be new hardware-assisted AI, AR, scenarios. Another might be video gaming. So these are all potential substitution threats. And we know how to compete directly against HBO Max and Disney Plus, and that's great and hard and interesting and fun. And then there's these substitution threats where getting into their business is not a good way to compete with it because we won't be as good at them. But for now, movies and series seem very strong, seem like a core human format. Remember that, movies have been around for over 100 years, continue to grow, TV series for 50 years, 60 years now, and continue to grow. So, I think we're on to a pretty long-term thing, but at least in principle, someday movies and TV shows, will be small.
All right. Well, we're almost out of time. And so will you please give a recommendation to everybody here at WIRED25 on what they should watch? And will you also please tell us what's coming next from the Obamas and Harry and Meghan?
Last night I watched a film, Wildlife, with Jake Gyllenhaal, that I thought was extraordinary. It's my kind of film. It's slow and beautiful in Montana. So if you like art films, discover Wildlife. And then Obamas and Harry and Meghan are producers that are doing a wide range of content. They're able to attract amazing storytellers for us, and look forward to their content along with all of our other incredible producers.
All right. Well, I'm glad you ended on Montana, because the first time I ever interviewed you, I called you from a payphone in Yellowstone National Park in Montana to fact check something. So thank you very much, Reid Hastings. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this part of WIRED25. See you in a second.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our panel, Innovating Through Design. My name is Irene Au. I am design partner at Coastal Ventures. Thanks for joining us today. On the panel are Celia Hodent. She is a freelance game UX strategist and former director of user experience at Epic Games, which creates Fortnite. And then we also have Drew Blackard, who is VP of Mobile Product Management at Samsung. So thank you for joining us. We'll start the panel with Celia. You are a psychologist by training, and you hold a PhD in the field. Not many people recognize that quite a few designers are actually psychologists. I imagine your background in psychology was valuable in helping you get inside the head of a gamer and use those insights to make Fortnite a compelling and successful game. So can you share some of your understandings of gamers' brains and what that meant for game design while you were at Fortnite?
Sure, I can try. So the brain is a bit complex, but experiencing a video game, just like anything that you experience, happens in your mind. And so we need to understand a little bit how people process information and learn about something. And we know that the brain has great performances, but we also have great limitations. Like, for example, when you learn about something or you process information from around you, it starts from your senses. So all the senses that we have way more than 5, is gathering all the information from the environment, and then we're going to process that information. The problem is that one of the big limitations of perception is that it's subjective. We don't all perceive the world as it is. There is one world, a reality, and we all perceive something different. And so when we create a game, we have to understand that perception is subjective, and we have to take a step back and verify that the things that all the inputs, all the stimuli that we have in the game, and that are mostly visual and audio, are going to be perceived the way we intended. And then when you learn, you have to memorize a bunch of stuff. And we know that the brain is not great at memorizing things. And we don't memorize things very precisely. Like if I ask you to remember how is the posture of the thinker, the sculptor from Auguste Rodin, most people don't exactly remember, is it like one hand on the left leg and which hand? We don't really remember that. And so we forget a bunch of stuff, and what we remember is not accurate. So we have to take that into account because we can't rely on players' memory, and playing a video game is across several days and sometimes weeks and months. And so we have to make sure that players are going to remember the important information, and we give away information all the time. And the last thing is well, it's not the last thing, but among the examples I want to give is when you process information, you have to pay attention. The more we pay attention to things, the better we process that information and we remember it. And in a video game, typically there's a lot of information going on. There's a lot of things to focus on, and we want to make sure that players are not going to be overwhelmed by too many things, and also that whenever we need to convey an important information, such as how to learn a new skill, how to use something, how a system is working, we want to make sure that players can really focus on it. So these are just a little bit of some examples, and of course it's a very complex topic about why cognitive science and cognitive psychology more specifically is really important, so that we can anticipate problems and make sure that the players are going to have the experience that we want for them. And so we take into account the limitations of the brain to do that.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your process at Epic for developing Fortnite? Much has been said about design thinking and systems design and things like that. And maybe you could walk us through, what does a general process look like, and maybe share a couple of examples that illustrate how your understanding of users helped you evolve Fortnite.
Sure. Yeah, we use the same design thinking process like in other industries, except that in the video game industry, I would say it's much newer than in other industries. So there's still a lot of things to put in place. But we make assumptions, and we're going to test these assumptions. So we make prototypes and we test them, like very quick and dirty prototypes. We test them with a few people. If it's working, then we start to implement them, and then we retest. And then we, of course, the artist is going to add the artistic layer to make it much more compelling. And we retest again. And once all the systems are in place, like in a game like Fortnite, there's a lot of different systems. You need to build, you need to craft, you need to manage your inventory. There's a lot of stuff going on. And once everything is put together, this is when typically the video game industry is using a lot beta test today, so we can make sure of what's going on in the wild as compared to playtesting, when people are coming really at the studio, so we can watch what's going on and if people understand it. And then we do beta tests, and so we can see in the wild if our assumptions are still correct, and we can also fine-tune all the stuff that we cannot fine-tune beforehand, such as balancing the game, making sure that if you have different classes in in the game, such as a constructor, a soldier, a ninja, making sure that it's well balanced and that the difficulty is never too easy or too hard. So there's a lot of things that we need to balance, and then that happens more towards the beta test. So it's very similar to the design thinking, a classic design thinking process, except that the objectives are a bit different. And unlike a tool, a video game has its it's not a means to an end. The whole point of playing a video game is to take pleasure into interacting with the system itself. So we need to take that into account, and not just making sure that the game is usable, but also engaging and fun. So it's the same, but there's a few different things that we don't have in the UX of tools or apps. In a game, we add some challenges, and these challenges need to be fun.
Well, so on this topic of improving usability and engagement, you kind of point out how designing for games has kind of a different intention in mind, because you're very focused on engagement and you're different from a tool. Let's switch over to Drew. So first of all, Drew, congratulations on the launch of the Galaxy Z Fold 2. I'm kind of curious to learn more about what did you learn from your users once you launched the original Fold, and how did that inform and inspire the design of the Fold 2?
Yeah, the second generation of a product is always really exciting to work on, because if you think about it, the first generation is usually built on an insight, really, just this idea. And with Fold, originally it was about designing a product that had the portability of a smartphone that offered a tablet-like experience. That was really the whole idea behind it. But then you put it out into the world and out into the wild, and people use it, and you need to see, is it really resonating in that way? Is that how people are actually using it? And so we talked a lot to our Fold users over the past year, and there's a couple of really interesting insights that we're able to take from them and really inspire the next generation of the product. The first is around, if you think about just that value proposition altogether, portability yet tablet-like experience, there's always going to be a little bit of a push and pull there as to what's the right size for a product like this? Because on one hand, if the screen's too big, it's not really portable anymore. If it's too small, then you don't get the tablet-like experience. And so, I have one right here where we've actually expanded the format of the display because 70% of our Fold 1 users said they wanted even more screen. So what we did is on the exterior display, it's a 6.2-inch display, which is the same size is basically our S20 model. So you get a standard smartphone experience on the exterior. And when you open it up, the unfolded experience is 7.6 inches. So it's a full tablet-like experience when you open it up. And a lot of that was driven around this idea that users wanted even more screen. Another question we had to address is, well, once you've got that larger format, what do you do with it, right? Because you want to be able to take advantage of more screen. And what we found is that our Fold users do more of just about everything. So they play more games, they watch more video, but they also do more productivity applications, things like Microsoft Office and their email and things like that. So they do a range of everything. And on top of that, we found that they were 7 times more likely to use our multi-window feature, which is the ability to bring up 2 apps on the screen at the same time. And so one of the things that we've done is we've implemented a feature called App Pairs, which allows you to basically, with a single click, launch right into that experience. So you have 2 apps going at once. This year, we're supporting even up to 3 applications. So you can really get a lot done. It's a multitasker's dream, but a lot of that was driven directly from those insights of those first generation Fold users.
Wow, that's really cool. It seems like you're enabling all kinds of new user experiences around this form factor. You have twice as many pixels in the same amount of space that we had before, and this is new and improved. I imagine along with this there's a whole ecosystem around this that you have to develop. Can you kind of share with us how you had to redesign the software around the Fold and the other experiences that are related to that, so that people can take full advantage of this new form factor?
Yeah, the 2 obvious ones I showed you already, right? Which is when you've got it as a traditional smartphone and then more open for the tablet-like experience. Where it got really interesting from a product perspective is, what do you do when it's in between? So starting with our Z Flip device earlier in the year, we developed a feature called Flex Mode. which basically within the hinge system, the device can tell a software application that the device is actually folded right now, halfway in between. And so it can tell the application to then orient itself differently for a use case. So that unlocks a lot of different types of things that you wouldn't be able to do with just a traditional smartphone. So one that I use a lot is it's just for video chat. We worked with Google to optimize the experience so you can have it hands-free in a tabletop mode while you have video chat open. And the viewfinder will orient itself towards the top screen, and the bottom will orient itself towards the controls. Of course, if you're doing things like email, you'll have the workspace on top and the keyboard on the bottom. So it's almost like having a mini little laptop or something to get things done on. And a range of different applications are going to do that so that when you have it actually physically folded, it's going to bring out even different software experiences from, say, the more full tablet immersive experience or the more traditional smartphone experience that it also offers.
Very cool. So a question for both of you. Was there anything, were you surprised by anything, like any insights or observations from users as you were developing your respective products? And how might those insights or surprises change the course of whatever it was that you were developing?
I can start. So I would say yes and no. We're always surprised by what users are doing because, again, we have our own mental model of what we want to create, and then they're users and they have their own objectives and they perceive things in their way. So we're always surprised. So this is not surprising, but there were a lot of things that can always. There's a few examples here. Fortnite, we really care about the pillars of the game. So, for example, construction is a strong pillar. So we gonna work a lot on this to make it clear for players, to make it fun for players to build. And there were funny moments where players start to learn how to build and they want to protect something from zombies attacking, because the first mode in Fortnite was Save the World, so it was players versus the environment, so zombies. And they were protecting something by building walls, but then they were walling themselves in, and they were like, oh no, what do I do? And so they were destroying one of the wall behind them to go around to shoot the zombies, or just crafting a staircase so they could go above it and then shoot the zombies. So it was not clear, obviously, how to edit a door in the walls. So it's one of these things that we have to think about. And like, shoot, it's not clear enough, and players are not going to have fun if they don't know how to edit windows or doors in Fortnite. So it's that sort of things, and you're like, oh no, it's not working.
Yeah, for us, I think an interesting one was around that flex mode that we just talked about on our Z Flip from earlier in the year when we launched it. We found that people were actually using the camera functionality within the flex mode, which was kind of a surprise to us. We didn't anticipate as much usage around that. And so we started looking into, were there more ways that we could use the camera, again, within that folded form factor. So a couple that we came up with for Fold 2 that are going to be really interesting. The first is what we call rear cam selfie. So because you can open the device and have a full viewfinder on the back, it allows you to use the full triple camera system for any selfies that you're taking. So, that gives you access to all of the pro video and pro camera features that we have. So a much more high-end camera system to take selfie shots and things like that. So it makes it super easy, where traditionally you're just going to use the front-facing camera, which is usually not as high performance of a camera. And so that's one area. And then another that's interesting for more, say, a content creator, again, back into that hands-free mode, you can actually just set the device on a tabletop like this. And if you had no one around to capture, this might be for someone who's into posting videos on YouTube or Instagram. You can prop it up like that, and the camera, using software and artificial intelligence, has what we call auto framing. So it'll keep the subject in the center of the frame no matter what you're doing. It'll actually zoom in and out and follow the subject within a certain boundary. And so that allows you to basically have like a cameraman behind the phone, but shooting it all by yourself. And again, a lot of those are driven by the fact that it's such a unique form factor that there's cool and new, interesting things that we can do with it. And a lot of that was just driven from that surprise finding that the camera was really a way people wanted to engage with that new form factor.
That's very cool. I can't wait to get my hands on one of these. So in this discussion, we've kind of explored how the whole field of design draws upon an understanding of people like user perception and cognition to make technology work for people, like make technology work for people the way they like to work and think. We have also witnessed how some companies can use this understanding to manipulate users, where engagement turns into addiction and technology takes over our attention. I want to hear your respective thoughts on this, and how do you try to strike a balance, if at all?
Drew can start now.
Yeah, for us, yeah, I'll take this one. I think there's a lot of tools that we can put in place to really help users gauge how they want to engage with their own kind of products and environments and services. And so a couple that come to mind for me are, first is around just screen time, right? People are concerned around the more time they're spending, with their smartphones, that it could disrupt sleep patterns, things like that. So in all of our products, Fold 2 included, we have built-in blue light filter that you can automate and kind of customize depending on how you use your own device and throughout the day, things like that. We also support a full suite of digital well-being features that are part of the Android ecosystem. And so those allow you to measure things like screen time and even app time. And if you want to kind of self-monitor those, it has the tools there to do it. And then I also think more broadly beyond just phones. Of course, Samsung provides a broad ecosystem of products. And so our wearables, for example, are a great way. They're cellularly connected. So if you wanted to leave the house for a few hours and just tune out, leave your phone at home, you can have that connection just in case, for emergencies, but have the peace of mind of not having to look at a screen as you're out and about and things like that. So we're trying to provide a range of different flexible options depending on how people want to manage that as it relates to their own life.
Yeah, so the question on about dark patterns and addiction. First of all, addiction is very specific. When we talk about addiction in common language, we mean pathological use and loss of control. So hope thank goodness this doesn't happen that often. But what we want to care about is we don't force your users or your players, in the case of video games, to stay or to come back or to pay more. So that's really the difference. I usually take the analogy of the difference between a magician and a pickpocket. Both of these people are using cognitive science and the knowledge of our brain limitations to do their jobs. But the magician does that with our content, and it's to entertain us. So a magician knows very well, for example, the limitation of our attention. They use a lot of tricks to make things appear, disappear without us noticing. But they do that with our consent, and we want to be tricked. We want to have that magic feel, and it's a win-win situation. Where we're happy, and the magician did their job, and they're happy too. A pickpocket is gonna use also the knowledge of the limitation of our attention to just steal from us. So it's not with our consent, and it's really exploiting our limitations to do stuff that is not beneficial for us, and it's only beneficial for the pickpocket. So this is the difference between the two. And when you have a UX mindset, you do the magic. You put the user at the center of what you're doing, and you want a win-win situation. The product is working, and so the people are happy, and so your product is going to be successful because you have that trust relationship. In games, the additional complication is that people play games to be entertained, and so we need to be engaging in games so that people can have fun. And the difference is when we try to force people to come back at a specific time, otherwise they're going to lose something that they care about. So it's really sometimes really difficult to navigate these gray areas, and this is a topic that I really care about. That's why with a few people we launched the Ethical Games Initiative to talk about all these gray areas and where would be the line when the game is just fun and engaging, and when does it start when the game is tricking people to to come back when they did not really want to that day. So it's a difficult topic. It's very nuanced, but it's very important to make that difference.
Well, I personally have never played Fortnite, but I keep hearing about how incredibly engaging it is. So I also appreciate that you and your colleagues are actively thinking about the balance and the line between engaging and addiction, engagement and addiction. So thank you. Celia and Drew, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and your experiences with us. We've learned a lot about how your respective companies have employed design. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening to help kick off WIRED25. I'm Sonia Chopra, Executive Editor of Bon Appetit, and I'm joined today by Gabriela Camara, a chef, restaurateur, and cookbook author with decades of experience running restaurants in Mexico City and San Francisco, including the well-loved Contramar and Cala. Gabriela has been called one of the most innovative women in food and drink and is widely recognized as a leader when it comes to driving sustainability and equitable work practices inside the restaurant industry. With us are John Gray, Pierre Serrao, and Les Walker, co-founders of Ghetto Gastro. The Bronx-based creative and culinary collective truly defies boundaries, pushing the limits of what we know as culinary events to bring people together and redefine community. The work of both Gabriela and Ghetto Gastro exists around the intersection of food, art, and culture, and both place heavy emphasis on sustainability and social justice. They are pioneers in our field and have worked hard to push our industry to be better. Please join me in welcoming them today. To get started, Gabriela, I hear you're going to walk us through making a Paloma.
Yes. I chose this drink because I think it's easy to find ingredients wherever you are. It's something that's made usually, or more traditionally, with grapefruit soda, so you don't even need the actual fruit. And I just thought it was something really easy. Everybody loves it. It's Mexican. It has tequila. And it has a little bit of Aperol, which is like my little Italian side there. So I love that drink. It's refreshing. You can drink it whenever, wherever. So are you ready to give it a shot?
Yeah, I'm ready. So I've drank many, many Palomas, but I've never actually made one myself. So I'm excited about this.
You are going to realize how easy it is.
Let's see.
Okay. You guys, I'm so sorry you can't join in the fun, but you'll learn it. It's easy. Easy, easy. Do you like tequila or do you prefer mezcal? In Mexico, we like people, there's a division between people who only drink tequila and people who are into more of the agave.
I like whichever one you like, so.
Fine. Okay, this one we're going to do with tequila. So do you have your glass? Okay, do you have a little bit of salt? You need to put a little bit of salt in a plate so that you can rim the glass. Okay, so with a lime, do you have a lime around there?
I have some. I have some lime juice. I was just gonna dip in.
Yes, perfect. Yeah. That was exactly what I was gonna ask you to do. Perfect. So wet the rim, put the salt. Perfect. Then do you have ice cubes around there? There you go.
Ice cubes.
You don't want it to be too heavy. You don't want the salt rim to be too heavy. And actually, some people like to do just like half of the glass rim, but I think that's great.
All right.
Okay. So then you're going to put the ice cubes in there.
Okay. I have my ice cube in here. Okay, well, maybe this is wrong. I was going to make it in here and then pour it into here because I couldn't get an ice cube to fit into my mason jar. All right. We're doing great.
Do you have huge ice cubes?
Yeah, I have like big cocktail ice cubes. I don't know if you can see them.
Fine. That's great. That's lovely. But, and then do you have a way of shaking it?
Do I need to shake it? I was going to stir.
No, you don't need to shake it, but it's usually you drink it with the ice cubes in the drink.
I see. Okay.
It's fine.
Okay.
Let's stir and try. Let's see. I mean, that looks like good ice, so it's not going to melt that easily.
If you're watching at home, please have smaller ice cubes.
You got to drink it out the big glass.
Yeah, that's true. I can just drink it out of here.
Just make it there.
Why not? Let's do it.
It's not very COVID-free to be sharing your drink with anybody, so you just have to finish it yourself.
That's true. Just drink the whole pitcher. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, so then you put the ice cubes in there. You add the tequila, which is usually like 1.5 ounces per glass.
Okay.
I mean, this is sort of a light Paloma. Okay.
Okay. That's 1/2 ounce.
Perfect.
That's an ounce. And then next is the Aperol.
Yeah, the Aperol and the lime juice, exactly.
And how much Aperol do we want and how much lime juice?
So you want about an ounce of lime juice and about half an ounce of Aperol. It's just, the Aperol is just like to give it a little bitterness.
Just a splash or like a full half ounce or?
Do half an ounce.
Okay. And I'm worried about spilling, so all my half ounce pours are a little bit scant. But that's fine, I think.
Yeah.
I just got my first cooking scale during the pandemic, and so now I feel like everything I do is so precise, and when I'm not doing something precise, I'm messing up.
The Paloma does not need to be that precise. I mean,
Thank goodness.
If you're running a bar and wanting to like take care of costs, yes. But if you're doing it at home, just make sure that it's not either too alcoholic or too sweet.
All right, I start.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Thank you.
Got some good color there. Got the flick of the wrist going.
The wrist motion, wrist action.
Okay, so you have the tequila, you have the Aperol, and you have the lime juice?
Yep.
Okay, and now you just need to be ready to put the grapefruit soda. Did you get a good grapefruit soda?
I got what I could find at my bodega, so maybe I won't show you the brand in case it's the wrong one.
What's the right one? The Jarnitos?
Usually you use like Squirt or Jarritos, yes. Usually, I mean but it's also super, I mean it's nicer if you use grapefruit juice and a little bit of soda.
Could be fire.
I've been so sad about the end of tomato season, but citrus is coming in strong soon, so it'll be nice.
I know. Citrus always makes up it's so happy to have citrus after you use tomatoes.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so top it up.
Top it up.
Should I drink it out of this, or should I pour it into my mason jar without an ice cube?
I really think you should drink from that.
Okay, I'm gonna top it up.
You know what you can do? You can add a little bit of salt into the glass since you didn't rim that one. Because the salt also makes the ice last longer, but it's actually really nice to have a little bit of the salt with the sweet drink.
Can you confirm what might be a fake cooking myth to me? If you heavily salt your water, it takes longer to boil. True, right?
That's a myth. I feel like it cooks faster.
Oh, it cooks faster.
I feel like the water boils faster when you add salt.
You know
this
what? I have actually measured it, and it takes exactly the same. I don't know if it's Mexico City. I don't know. But, with pasta, they always say, let it boil. Once it's boiling, add the salt. It like goes up again, and then put the pasta in. And I've never put the salt before the water boils. But I actually tried it once, and I measured it with a friend that was arguing exactly the same thing, and it took like seconds of difference.
Fascinating. Cheers.
Cheers. Did you put a little bit of salt in there?
A little bit of salt and the grapefruit. Yeah, it's delicious. It's balanced. Very good.
So easy. Can I just say, I think it's so appropriate that you're drinking a Paloma, Sonia, because today we're celebrating Mexican Independence Day. The independence from Spain over 200 years ago. And many Mexicans, I hope, can be drinking and celebrating, even though this is a very different day of independence celebration. For the first time, we've had nobody downtown Mexico City, and nobody gathering, and nobody, everybody's safe distancing and socially distancing. So enjoy your Paloma. I hope everybody can make themselves a Paloma at least.
Thank you for walking me through it.
Thank you. And happy independence for everybody.
Yes. Let freedom ring.
So you mentioned, the difference maybe being in Mexico, being here. And I was curious, you run restaurants in two countries with two totally different sets of policy and two totally different restaurant rules. And specifically inside of Mexico, you work as an advisor to the president of Mexico, and you're on the government's Council of Cultural Diplomacy. So I was just wondering, how has your work kind of changed and evolved during this time in the pandemic? Can you tell us a little bit about what it's been like?
Well, it's absolutely, it's absolutely different. San Francisco, just the difference of climate. One city is by the ocean, sea level. The other one is high altitude in the mountains. It is in a plateau, and it's super, Mexico City is this like flat, lovely climate. It's the closeness to the equator makes it really easy to grow things. And we have an amazing farmland in Mexico City, which is something that many people don't know about Mexico City because it's so populated. But we actually are able to grow a lot of our vegetables in Mexico City. And then Mexico is such a centralized country that we get tons of things in the city. But anyway, running restaurants in San Francisco and in Mexico City, yes, I could not think of two cities that are close-ish, like in the big scheme of the globe, and so different. San Francisco is a very small city, 700,000 people living there only. I don't know. I mean, there are, on the other hand, so many similarities. I've found that San Francisco and Mexico City are much more similar than I expected, because I had never lived in San Francisco until 2014 when I went there. And, you know, the abysmal difference between those who live well and those who really struggle in the city is a big similarity with Mexico City. I've seen the growth of homelessness and you know, and drug use in the street, people just living in the streets and people remaining homeless because it's so difficult to pay a rent in San Francisco. So, you know, in the Bay Area in general. So that's been a similarity, like an unfortunate similarity that I didn't expect, but that we've lived with. On the other hand, you know, in restaurants in Mexico City, of course, things are more and more uniform, and there are rules that apply to everybody, and there are, you know, now with the pandemic, we've learned a lot about how to keep safe and how to, like, have all these hygiene and labor laws that apply to absolutely everybody. But in general, I find that Mexico City is more about, like, knowing who you need to go talk to so that you can get this and this and this other permit, or having the right lawyer to figure out your way through legality in opening a restaurant. In San Francisco, it's very difficult to open something, but once it's open, then you have it, you know how it is. It's sort of very straightforward. Mexico City is much more challenging in a way. But then on the other hand, so many other things are just easier because things are less established, I find. So I don't know. I mean, there are so many differences that one can talk about and so many similarities. We could go in terms of ingredients. We can go in terms of the way people live, the way people eat, the way, you know, people in San Francisco, nobody stays for a long lunch in San Francisco. In Mexico City, everybody who can afford it just lingers at the table. People really enjoy each other's company. It's very seldom that one sees one person eating alone in Mexico City in a restaurant like Contramar. In San Francisco, there are many people who just come and eat at the bar. In San Francisco, everybody finishes dinner and then they're off. Tacos Cala, which is in the back alley, now they're both closed, unfortunately, because of the situation in the city. But you know, one of the really interesting things about these two cities is, like, the conviviality of people around eating. For me, that's the main difference.
I have a question.
Yes,
we plan on going to Oaxaca maybe for 2 or 3 weeks this fall. We got to reconnect, and I need.
We got to reconnect. I have so many suggestions. Oaxaca is one of the most fascinating and wonderful places of Mexico.
I love it. Okay, so specifically in terms of dining right now in the pandemic, my understanding is in Mexico City, there's indoor dining in the restaurants. I live in Brooklyn in New York. I haven't been inside a restaurant to eat in, 6 months probably. I'm really curious to know what that's like and what it's like as a business owner to make that happen.
It's so sad. The indoor dining is a very reduced amount of diners in the dining room. Contramar is such a crowded dining room, and it's really sad to see Contramar be so empty, because we are, the capacity now is 30%. So, and depending on the size, but there has to be at least 1.5 meters of distance between, that's like 6 feet, 7 feet, between tables and people at the restaurant. So it's really reduced. So it's somewhat sad in a way. Just
you feel as though you've lost kind of the energy and the vibe of a space that before was predicated on people watching and being around.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Do you still have the big tart on the menu though?
Yes.
The fig cake. Okay.
Yes. And we have Yes, we have, the food is delicious, but then a lot of the Contramar experience is being around so many people, eating and having a great time.
Yeah. In terms of building a business and building a team and kind of fair and equitable practices, I'm curious just in general, is that something that's easier to do in Mexico City, or is that something that's easier to do in San Francisco? I know your restaurant in San Francisco has a lot of policies in place just to make sure that the workplace is really fair and inclusive.
No, in Mexico, it's very serious. I mean, sort of labor laws are, I think even more so than in the United States, have been more preoccupied, sort of aware of workers' needs in general. For example, Social Security is an obligation for every employer in Mexico City, in Mexico, in the whole country. But it's been that way for decades. I mean, it's not something new. In Mexico, we had a revolution in 1920, and that really changed sort of the relationship, or at least the constitutional rights of everybody, in a way that was very, much more advanced than the United States for sure. And just in terms of the government taking care of people, which is, when you have a corrupt government, then the reality ends up being sort of not as good as it looks on paper. But that's definitely, there's an awareness that we all have sort of lived by in Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at the start of the pandemic when it really was on businesses to decide what to do with their staff, what to do, what feels fair. And it was so difficult for people to kind of understand and to make those hard choices with no input from the government. So, at a baseline, it's nice that you had that in Mexico.
Yes. I also feel that, in the United States, I feel we're still sort of figuring it all out on our own. And it's also in the United States, it's, it's a like all the different states have different regulations. So it's really very challenging. I feel that in Mexico, even though different states do have some autonomy, it's much more guided by things are much more guided by the government in a way that does take it, that does take into account really centrally workers' compensation and situation, and to the degree that many business owners are super frustrated with the government.
It's a good segue. Earlier we were talking about the importance of voting, and maybe I'll just take this a second to say, anybody who's listening to this, please vote in November. This is such an important election here in the United States, and there's so much that we can change and that we can do. So please take a second to do everything you can.
It's never enough.
Everybody got to
put on your gloves. Yep. Hit those polls, put on your gloves, get out there, cast those absentee ballots early. Don't be afraid. Don't let the voter suppression frighten you. They're doing a lot of work to deter us from getting out and casting those ballots. So from New York to Atlanta to Louisiana, all the way to Cali, it's like every vote is super important this year. Too many people didn't vote in 2016, and that's how we got in the place where we are. So thinking that we're rebelling by not going out and voting, you're not going to get what you want that way. We got to get out, we got to make change, and that's the best way for us to change people in office and the policies is to vote. Make it pop.
I love it. All right. So John, Pierre, how are you? I know you're going to be cooking for us today, but first I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about what exactly you do. What exactly is Ghetto Gastro?
How you doing?
Peace.
We're here at the location in the Bronx. Ghetto Gastro is we're storytellers, and we use food and experiences around food and food history to tell stories about culture, life, and vibes, really. Activism, art, design are all different mediums we like to employ to spread the message.
It's definitely about empowerment and creating the catalyst for the next generation of entrepreneurs, creators outside, not only the Bronx, but the world, all over New York City to the world. So it's just us creating the catalyst and using our platform to spread the knowledge on food as a weapon and a weapon of class destruction, educating them to take it to the next level, and the generation cycles of diseases.
Food as a weapon is something that you have talked about a lot, and I'm hoping you can just kind of expand on that and how kind of food is used to oppress certain people and what you're doing to change that.
Well, I think that, I can't remember his exact name, but he was the Secretary of Agriculture in the United States back in the 70s, and he actually coined the phrase food as a weapon. And really what we mean by food as a weapon is, like, it's a system that's been designed in order for people to be oppressed, for people not to be able to operate at their optimum self by feeding them foods that are full of sugars, pesticides, processed foods, and 6 of the 10 leading causes in the United States and amongst communities of color are all of the things that we consume and put in our bodies. So by us talking about how they use food as a weapon to oppress, we use food as a weapon to, to arm ourselves to be ready for everything that life has to throw at us. So we make sure that the things that we put in ourselves are all life. We're heavy plant-based over here. We're not vegans, but we do have a diet that are predominantly based around plants and vegetables, and just being a lot more conscious about the sourcing and the and about what we're consuming amongst ourselves and our community, and just spreading that message. Because bringing awareness to the situations, a lot of people haven't necessarily been that focused on the things that we put in our bodies, but like first thing when it comes to health and like knowledge of self is everything that you consume.
The temple, you got to maintain the temple, and what you put in is what you put out. Your input is going to equate to your output. So yeah, that's the vibe.
So tell us a little bit about what you're making today.
Okay, so we're gonna switch cameras now. Little studio magic.
Good, y'all see me in my clip. Today I'm making a dish. It's a spicy fusilli dish that was actually started off as a dish that I wanted to go get at Johnny and Vinny's in LA. I was in LA at the time. Johnny and Vinny's was shut down, of course, due to COVID. And I really liked the dish, but what I really wanted to do to the dish was change the narrative on it and make it a plant-based dish, because I do not eat dairy at all. So quarantine gave me the opportunity to experiment with that, and I used plant-based butters, plant-based Parmesan cheese, and I added, in addition of myself, my personal little touch, I added some white truffle to it as well. So it became like a white truffle spicy fusilli. Pretty much remixed Johnny and Vinny's joint. And it starts off by cooking off some Martelli's fusilli pasta. This is an imported fusilli from Italy. We're going to start off, as Gabriella said earlier, man, we're going to start off by seasoning that water for the pasta. In the meantime, while that pasta is boiling, let's start working on our sauce. Started off with a little bit of evil and extra virgin olive oil just to coat the pan a bit. Don't go too crazy. Some onion. All right. Let's get that little translucent in the pan.
I was really glad to see that y'all picked Italian food, because it segues kind of nicely into something I wanted to talk about, which is I guess you could say, like, the dichotomy of cuisines and the way that people talk about them here in the US. In the last 5 years, I think especially, there's been this kind of heavy discourse inside the food world around phrases like cheap eats, right? Like, cheap eats is Indian food, it's Chinese food, it's Mexican food, it's soul food. These are foods that people traditionally don't want to pay extra money for. Fusilli, like you said, is a dish that's pretty easy to make. Inside a restaurant, you could pay $22 for it, but at home, it would cost you probably much less than that. And I'm just curious, kind of all of your perspectives on that, on this kind of idea of cheap eats, if you think it's changing. I know there's been a lot of attention drawn to the problems with the phrase, but do you see in your own experience somebody who runs Mexican restaurants, somebody who's cooking in the Bronx, an area that a lot of people kind of like equivalate with cheap food? Are you seeing real change when it comes to that phrase and that kind of idea?
Well, I think a big reason why people look at food that usually comes from maybe brown, black people, not that are not Eurocentric, is just an extension of white supremacy and how society values peoples and their creations. So hopefully, like, what we're trying to do is definitely disrupt that notion and bring some other narratives. And I think, like, what Gabriella is doing and with Mexican cuisine is like bringing it into a context like, yo, this is a very technically rich, historical flavors are being layered, much like West African, Caribbean, and like American cuisines, which is when you think about what American cuisine really is usually rooted in indigenous and practices that were developed by enslaved Africans that were being oppressed in the American South and the North. So, yeah, what we're doing is with Ghetto Gastro is exploring the diaspora, having a lot of different inspiration and influences from our travels abroad, and creating a new language in the space with those things. And selling it for a lot so they know that it ain't cheap.
And reparations, it's the reparations.
We got to get it how we live.
I mean, that's the real issue, right? Like, I mean, with Mexican food, I can't go on enough. You know, it's always been considered in the United States, especially, like cheap food. And it has to do with the population who consumes it to begin with. But I feel very proud to have sort of insisted always, to begin with in my restaurants in Mexico, on paying what you need to pay to eat what you're going to eat. Because we, as a restaurant industry, we're just subsidizing a lifestyle of people who want to, you know, get the cheapest version of like a fancy or whatever, or like a sophisticated experience of, or a, you know, it takes a lot, as we know. Like, we can't go on enough about this, right? It takes so much to make good food. It takes like careful learn farming. It takes, you know, careful learn handling. It takes careful, you know, careful and good cooking and good maintenance and good serving and good everything. And why is that not going to be valued in food? Like, why are the only important people in the food chain consumers, final consumers? It is so pathetic. And if we don't get our act together in that, you know, in food, just in food, we have the whole spectrum. We really need to get it together. And I think if COVID doesn't, I mean, before it was challenging, but if after COVID we don't do it, then there's really no like solving this society in any possible way.
So as diners, what can we do?
Support things that are well done. So, you know, maybe actually try, you know, be conscious of the need of spending maybe more money on a dinner than on a t-shirt. I mean, I don't know, you know, there's so many things. But it really has to do with respect of everybody who's involved in the process of doing something or getting something to you.
Right, spend that money. Like, if you're expecting to have a world-class taco or whatever food it may be, cornbread, whatever it may be, you're going to expect people to use the best ingredients. And in order for them to get the best ingredients, for them to get the best product, you have to pay. And everybody needs to be compensated, all the way down to the farmers and the people who are laboring to, you know, to get that final product to you. Because it's not just about the final product. And people, we tend to be very, selfish when it comes to eating food. Like, I want this is for me. But when you remove yourself and you think about everything else that's been involved, you have a lot more of appreciation for where it came from. You're not going to go to Gabriella's restaurant and expect the same thing that you're going to get from a Taco Bell or anything like that. Like, the levels and the amount of hands that it touches and the amount of care that it goes through is, you know, it's night and day. So you pay what you get for. Like, if you want to go to a world-class restaurant, you should be ready to, you know, dig in your pockets a little bit and spend some world-class change.
But even when it's not world-class, like, if it's not like, it's like we have La Mirada, it's a Oaxacan spot in the neighborhood, and it's like the work they're putting into making those moles, and it's like real labor, it's effort, it's ancestral knowledge that is valuable. It's like, we can't just put value on mother sources from Escoffier. Right. You know,
yeah, I was going to say that. You can't, I mean, it's not about making it fancy and therefore being able to charge. It's about really making it responsible throughout the process. Like, it's about really knowing what it takes.
And respecting the process.
And we know that, you know, like, industrial agriculture is subsidized, and that's why it can be cheap. But it's also, it's like, it's not cheap on the long run for so many reasons. It's bad for the environment, and that's expensive. It's bad, like, there are all these expenses that aren't taken into account when we talk about industrialized food and a society that wants to have everything there and fast. I really take on the slow food, philosophy in terms of that. It's not true that food is cheap. Good food is not cheap. Nothing that is worth it is cheap. Like it has to do with our value system of what is cheap and what's expensive. And expensive isn't necessarily really costly. Expensive is just maybe expensive because it's like a merchandising scheme. So I really feel that we need to rethink about all that. Like we really need to put our attention in the important issues. And the important issues are the environment, the well-being of everybody, the health of everybody. And I think that this is it's the right environment to be talking about these things.
Well, yeah, it's like it's now or never, right? It's like, what?
Are you kidding? If it's not now, when? Seriously, then we're really doomed forever.
Yeah.
And if anybody doesn't know, like, really what the sort of effort that it takes, it's like, just try to grow some tomatoes. And then see it, and just try to grow like one tomato plant. See how much effort and time it takes you to get your tomato plant from seed to actual product, and then turning that into something. And like imagine that for every ingredient that has to go into your dish. It's like it takes time and care, and like that's also what you spend the money on is the time. It's like you have to pay people for the time.
Then when you do take care of a tomato plant and you realize how many tomatoes you actually can get from a tomato plant, then you get into the whole other thing of, oh my goodness, and what do you do to conserve them, and how do you keep them, and how do you actually manage to use up all the tomatoes that you have in like 2 weeks of the year, right? So I really feel that in terms, just for all of us to really appreciate food, I do believe that gardening is an important part of it. Just like to get that experience, to know what it's like. Or, yeah, to
Well, I feel like people don't use their time. I feel like people choose to use their time differently, right? Like you could, the same amount of time that like when you come home from work that you spend time like watching TV or doing something else, you could actually take that sort of time and dedicate it to focusing on your garden. And if you have the space, but focusing on things that will help bring, make a more sustainable lifestyle, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's one of the issues in the U.S. is that we've started to treat food as a convenience thing or a luxury thing, right? And you've kind of lost that whole spectrum in between. But I want to go back. You mentioned tomatoes, and we have somebody cooking a pasta sauce for us, and I think we should.
Sure do. All right, we're going to kick it back to that.
So we back now. So the sauce was cooked down, and I threw it in a blender. This is
Okay.
This is canned tomato. This is canned tomato, imported from Italy. Caramelized onion, garlic, red chili flake, Maldon salt. We're gonna blend this.
While he's blending, I'm gonna ask y'all a question. When you caramelize onions, how long does it take you?
So I just caramelize it until it has a slight amber color to it. So with that is bringing another level to the flavor composition of it, because the sugar is naturally coming out of the onion, as opposed to a raw onion where you're gonna get a very acidic flavor. When you caramelize it, you get more of a more subtle, sweet caramelized flavor. Then you add the garlic, you cook that garlic out, and we add the tomato paste, and then we buzz it for a second. So this is the Mayokos plant-based butter. This is 100% dairy-free, guilt-free. You can enjoy it and not feel bad that you didn't hurt any animals. You didn't hurt anyone. All right. You got some plant-based Parmesan as well.
Is that made from almonds?
The plant-based Parmesan is actually made from cashews.
Okay.
Cashews, cultures, nutritional yeast.
I feel like nutritional yeast has really had a moment during the pandemic too here in the U.S.
Totally. And with all this fermentation fad.
So the pasta's already done. We got the sauce done already. So now we're going to go into the pan, cook pasta. This is the sauce after it's blended. You got a nice color to it.
I love it.
This is a super simple dish too. Like it's good to do with your kids at home. Good to include family members. And it's really tasty as well.
Gabriella, how do you feel about cashew-based Parmesan cheese?
I feel that if it's good, it's great.
So me personally, I'm into spice. I don't know if you guys are, but I'm into spice. So I added a touch bit more of some chili oil to mine. A touch of chili oil and some white truffle oil. Make it pop with those truffles, man. And there you have it. Bit of Maldon salt. I'm gonna plate this.
And will you tell us a little bit about John and Vinny's while you're plating that?
John and Vinny's is an Italian spot in LA. Really known for their authentic pastas. Really known for their authentic Italian cuisine. And they're the homies, man. We met them in Copenhagen in 2015. And ever since then, you know, we just been shooting it, kicking it with those guys. And when I'm in LA, I run down on them and I go get the I get the chicken parmesan, I get the mushrooms, I get pizzas. They're really well known for their brick oven pizzas. They're fire. And so I support those dudes out there. They're doing something really good out there.
Is it true that y'all also met Gabriella in Copenhagen?
Yeah, that's true. Finish this off with some garlic chips. Just for some texture.
That's fried garlic?
Yes, these are garlic chips that I blanched twice. I blanched them twice and then I slow fry them to a beautiful light amber color. Finish with a little bit more truffle oil. And that's that.
Beautiful.
Yum. I would eat that.
Do the garlic chips last forever?
You can actually keep these garlic chips in your pantry for up to a few months at a time. I don't think they'll last a few months because they're good tasting. And I like to put them on everything. I even crush them up and I mix them up with my panko crumbs when I finish like a mac and steez with some good panko crust. I crush up some garlic chips and finish a lot of dishes off with that as well. So it lasts a while because they're blanched twice and they're slowly fried. So we take all of that moisture out of them and they last a pretty long time.
That's great. Okay, so we've talked about sustainability quite a bit, and I just wanted to kind of hear from you all. What's your advice for people who want to do more when it comes to sustainability, but they're not quite sure where to start?
Well, before we get into that, I just want to say that one of the things that's super, ironic about the Bronx is the home to the largest food distribution center of its kind in the world, meaning it's a really big fish market, only second in size to Tuskegee in Tokyo, the meat market and the produce market, yet our community is one of the most food insecure in the city. And then we also have the poorest industrial district in the country. And a lot of the truck traffic that we deal with, the fossil fuel emissions that we deal with from the trucks that deliver the food from the distribution center elsewhere around the city and around the Northeast, result in high asthma rates, high hypertension, and then we don't have the nutritious foodstuffs in the community. But I'll let P and Les get into how a home cook at home could work on being more sustainable and less wasteful.
Yeah, I think in terms of being more sustainable as home cooks, just be more realistic with your schedule and know what you have lying ahead. If you have a busy week ahead of you that you have planned out, maybe you don't do as big of a grocery shop if you're not going to be at home as much. What I like to do is if I know I'm going to be busy, I like to prep meals ahead of time. So if I have like a big pot of soup or anything large like a lasagna or anything like that, I'll make a big batch and keep some in the freezer or just put more in the fridge. And then if you tend to overshop and you have extra onions, garlic, tomatoes, any extra herbs, peppers, et cetera, you can either practice making stocks, practice preserving things. Preservation methods, it sounds like it's a lot, but it's really not. It's like having a mason jar with a lid and putting some tomatoes in.
I know about those mason jars.
Putting a mason jar in a pot of water so that it's barely covered, and you can preserve your tomatoes, your peaches. You can make jams and stuff. Just get a little more creative. Make a sofrito. Make a big batch of sofrito. freeze it inside of ice cube trays so that you can have easy access to fast cooking and tasty cooking as well. So just exploring different things, trying not to throw stuff out, really. I think that's one major way. Maybe getting a good water filtration system in your home so you don't have to, so you can steer yourself away from using single-use plastic.
Well, Pete touched on a lot of really good points, but and as well, I like to practice compost. I'm really into juicing, so a lot of products where I might have the root left over, or I might have extra leaves left over, things of that nature. I juice those, and we work with La Mirada in their garden, and we help them out by providing them with the compost that we have in our homes and the compost in the Bronx community. So there's a lot of things that you can do to add to the equity of your community by composting.
I could not agree more. These small things can actually make a huge difference in your food waste and your just taking advantage of everything that you have. If you go to the market, then you need to learn how to actually use up everything, because the worst thing is to go to the farmer's market, get amazing produce, and then not use it, right. Which I think happens to a lot of people. So that's why you need to be really careful with what you buy and how just to think of what you're going to do with everything that you have.
Exactly. And pay attention to what Ghetto Gastro is doing and what Gabriella's doing, man. So you get these tips and you get these isms and this knowledge.
Absolutely.
Stay in tune. It is.
So as we're wrapping up, one last question. How can we support you?
We have, we just released a waffle maker, and then we have a whole appliance line coming out called Crux GG, available exclusively at Williams-Sonoma. So that and a percentage of the proceeds go to support organizations like Rethink, who we've been working with La Mirada and feeding people as our COVID response, but also the Know Your Rights campaign, because as we know, it's two pandemics. You have COVID, but also and the murdering of Black people in the United States. So we're fighting both of those causes, and it's the Black Power Kitchen. So just tune in, tell a friend to tell a friend, watch the content on Instagram, and check in. We also got some food products dropping towards the holidays, so just keep the cycle going. Recycle these Black and brown dollars.
Tap in.
I love it. Gabriella, what about you? How can we support you?
I guess by just keeping on, coming to the restaurants. I think, you can support by, again, being conscious, being aware of all the pertinent issues. Voting, as we said, I think it's a time to really hold on to each other and to the causes that we believe in every way, in every aspect of our lives.
And what's so crazy? I just saw Mexico sent firefighters to America to help with the fires in the Northwest. So I'm like, let's just let that sink in. When the current administration in the United States has a lot of things to say about Mexico, but Mexico's sending us help when we need it. So I just want everybody to let that sink in as they go to register, hit those polls, and all of these things.
And the Mexicans are native to America before everybody else. So let's also know that as well. So
California was Mexico, is Mexico.
Indigenous.
And there's so many Mexicans legally and illegally in the United States. And, that was, I don't know if you all heard the speech of the Mexican president when he finally went to see Trump, which was like a huge historic thing, because they do not agree, I think, I don't think they agree on many things, but on many important things. But one of the things the president said is, just let's all be aware of how intertwined these two countries are. So yes, let's be as good neighbors as we can, and not only good neighbors, but just good humans to whomever needs it around us.
Absolutely. Spread love.
Spreading love. I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you, Ghetto Gastro, for taking the time to walk us through your recipes, for talking about these important issues. Thank you, Wired25, for giving us the space to talk about these things. And everybody have a great night.
Thank you, Sonia.
Gabriella, if you still got my number, send me a text. I definitely want to talk about that Oaxaca
Thank you so much.
stuff. And it's so good to see you.
Yes, let's be in touch, you guys. It's so nice to see you three. So nice. Keep up the good work. I love it. I love you.
Love you too.
Love you too.
Bye.
Candyman. The urban legend is, if you say his name 5 times while looking in the mirror, he appears in the reflection and kills you.
Who would do that?
Candyman. 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 Well, we're still alive. Let's go. Trina, you broke the door. This isn't funny!
I feel really connected to this neighborhood. Cabrini Green. It was the projects. I just moved in around the corner.
The old candy factory.
I'm an artist.
You looking for Candyman? He's the monster that's part of this neighborhood.
Why are you drawn to this?
I'm hoping to spread the story all about Candyman. The mirror invites you to summon him. You should say his name. I dare you.
Candyman.
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 Don't say that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jason Parham. I'm a senior writer at Wired, where I cover pop culture. I could not be more thrilled today. I'm joined by Nia DaCosta. She's a director, screenwriter. She's behind the hugely hotly anticipated horror project Candyman, which drops next year. Nia, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
To give the audience a little bit of context, Nia's first project from 2019, Little Woods, which starred Tessa Thompson and Lily James, centered on 2 sisters in a North Dakota oil boomtown. It unpacked a lot of important issues around gender, around housing, around healthcare, around drug addiction. So we're definitely going to dig into that a bit as well. It's also reported that Nia landed one of the most coveted gigs in Hollywood. She'll be directing Captain Marvel 2. So Nia, thank you so much for being with us today. So we just saw the trailer for Candyman. I'm dying to know, were you a fan of horror films growing up?
I was a huge fan of horror films growing up. I would go to my grandma's house after school, and I would turn off all the lights before she got back from work and watch like Tales from the Crypt and like any horror movies I can get my hand on. And yeah, I was super into them. And Candyman was one of the big ones that loomed very large in my childhood. But before I even saw it, I was being dared to say it in the mirror, his name 5 times in the bathroom at school, which I refused to do, of course. But yeah, I love horror films.
Was there anything about the original that stood out in your mind as a child growing up that you took into the film when you were making the film?
Oh man, yeah, I think the first film is so unique, and the style is really specific and different, and it really feels like a bit of a fever dream, watching this woman's descent, and Candyman, of course, Tony Todd as Candyman is so iconic and such an impressive new kind of villain, at least in the context of the 1992 film. And so, yeah, this really thinking about him as this iconic character and wanting to pull back the layers and expand more on what that actually means and who Candyman is, what Candyman is, was what I wanted to bring into this version.
So your version does so much visually, structurally. I got to see a preview of it. It's amazing. Talk to me a little bit about your choices. How did you go about making this version your own?
Right. Yeah. It's like a million little decisions, every day. But for me, what I love so much about the original is how unique it is how specific it is. It is a filmmaker's vision. And so insofar as I was able to, I really wanted to make this feel like, a very specific, unique, visually interesting film, and not just like a horror with some people dying and who cares. And the other thing is, we really wanted to expand on the mythology. So from, the very first draft of the script that I read before I officially was on the film, there was this kernel there of like, okay, there's more to Candyman than just this guy named Daniel Robitaille. There's more to the idea of Candyman. And so that too, I think, was, in thinking about the first film, what I wanted to bring to this one, just like more.
So now you collaborate with Jordan Peele on the script, who many consider the Hitchcock heir apparent. What was it like working with him on this project?
It was cool. I think my favorite part of the process with Jordan was just sitting in a room together and like shooting ideas back and forth and seeing how his mind works and just like watching him work and just being able to create something. That's always my favorite part of the process when collaborating, especially on at the writing stage. So yeah, it was really cool. Like, I'm a huge fan of Get Out and I love Cam Peele. So sometimes I'd like reference a skit and he'd be like, that's a real deep cut. I'm like, I've watched it so many times. But yeah, it was really fun. It was great.
So the movie, which I love, it's sort of, it merges the past and the present and threads so many themes together. Police brutality, a history of lynching, gentrification, sort of white theft of Black capital, what I like to call sort of everyday horrors or social horrors. So why do you think, or why would you say the horror genre, which you're working in, is such a right vehicle to bring attention to these injustices?
I think what's great about horror is that you can layer like the horror, the physical horror of like being in a space and being worried about someone about to get, killed by a killer or haunted in a haunted house or any of those things. And you can just easily lay on the like personal horrors, real life horrors onto these tropes as like metaphor. And what's great about horror is that horror stays with you after you leave the theater. I mean, you can say every great film stays with you, but horror really, like, it's in your psyche. It like gets deeper into your brain. I think understanding how horror of a ghost or a serial killer or whatever can be as tangible for people who don't understand like Black trauma, Black horror, Black pain. It can be as tangible for them in the moment they're watching the film. And hopefully when they leave the theater, it's sitting with that. Not just like ghosts, but also with, like real pain of people that are part of my community. So that's what I think is useful about horror in that context. But there's so many, of course, ways to tell the stories that we're telling.
Right. So speaking of the so many ways to tell the stories, I'm curious, in what ways do you see Candyman being a bridge between sort of the original slasher trilogy, horror classics like Nightmare on Elm Street, and the future of the genre with stuff like Lovecraft Country on HBO?
Yeah, so I guess I'll address like the Freddy Krueger, of it. Candyman himself is an iconic villain. And so I think what we're able to do in this film is like pull back the curtain on like what makes a villain, who calls a monster, who decides that. That's a lot of what our story is about, and how we tell stories to scare each other, protect each other, uplift each other, and they can kind of all be the same story. The future of the genre, I think it's great that there are more Black voices in the genre. I like that it's more, feels more potent, talking about real life horrors, and disseminating that, further into the culture. And so I'm just excited, in particular in horror, just to see more of that, but also more different kinds of stories. I'd love to see Black people in horror films and in the horror space that's not just about this kind of trauma and pain, but can also be, about other aspects of our existence. And there's so much space for that in film in general, but especially in horror.
I think you said it right too. It's like, who is the monster exactly in sort of Candyman? Your film is sort of almost doing that too. It's like it's turning its sort of the original question on its head. So yeah. Definitely. So there's a line in the film that really grabbed me, that really kind of speaks to our present moment. And without giving away too much, I want to engage a little bit. The line goes, "They love what we make and not us." And so I'm curious, as a creative, do you see that and say, how can I reorient that kind of thinking with my work? Or is your job as an artist not to find value in those systems of thinking? I guess maybe a more clear line of questioning is, do you take on that burden of making the larger white world love and see our beauty in whatever ways you can? Or is the work for you about something else entirely?
I think it's all those things and more. It's at once sort of, just having that line in there, because a lot of people have mentioned it, which I'm really happy about. Just having that line in there is just like, I think what a lot of Black creatives and creatives of color think about all the time. It's like, I think in particular for Black creatives, like especially if you're like a musician and you do hip hop or rap, like hip hop's the most popular genre of music now. And yet you know, I'll go to like a Kendrick Lamar concert and hear like the white teens in the front row saying the N-word, like, you know, rapping along. And so it's like, okay, you love this music, you love him, but you don't understand what he's saying. Because if you understood it, you wouldn't be out here yelling the N-word and making like finger guns and being ridiculous. You know what I mean? And so that's what I mean. It's like you love this culture. You love how it makes you feel. You love, you know, the look of it. You love how it makes you feel cool. You love fucking sneakers, whatever. But you don't understand the people. You don't see the people as people. They're just like there to entertain you. And so that's sort of what that means. I think in particular for an artist like Anthony, whose work is so personal, it's like direct from him to the canvas to the audience. He kind of, you leave the building as an artist once your art's out there. And so for me, I hope that I can create full characters, full humans that the audience can empathize with. So that, you know, one day it's not like, oh, they love what we make, but not us. It's like, oh, they love what we make and they understand us. But I also, I also feel like the burden of like trying to explain shit to white people is so inside of so many Black films. And I would love to eliminate that as soon as possible. I think, so for me, I try to come at it from the point of view of, I'm giving you fully fledged characters, full human beings. I hope you empathize with them. I hope you understand them, but I can't teach you how to do it, you know?
So one of my favorite things that Candyman does, it's such a film about place and setting. It takes place in Chicago in the Cabrini Green projects. Your debut feature from last year, Little Woods, was set in a sort of small rural North Dakota town. Both films have such a strong sense of place, almost as if these cities are characters themselves. Why is that important to you in your filmmaking? And how does like change that heighten the film exactly?
Yeah, I think place is super important because your environment so influences how you feel about yourself, how you interact with your world. I mean, I think we're all at home right now, and we really are understanding how much like our homes are important to our sense of self, our sense of well-being, our neighborhoods, and so it just has to be a part of the character journey, the character's study that I present in the films that I make. And then with Candyman, you know, it was so important to go back to Cabrini Green. And the fact that Cabrini Green doesn't really exist in the way that it did in the 1992 film is why the film, you know, even deals with gentrification and tries to look at the many different ways that racial violence can exist and manifest in the world. So yes, environment's super important. It's man, especially in a country like ours where, you know, like we're dealing with like redlining, housing segregation, gerrymandering. It's like so important. And, you know, so, yeah.
So I want to dial it back just a little bit and go back to your first film. Little Woods was your breakout hit from last year. It was about two estranged sisters in North Dakota who were sort of doing what they needed to get by, to survive. How did this story come to you and why was it important to tell?
Yeah, so that one started from me wanting to tell a story about two women living in a rural part of America and dealing with poverty. And I knew that I wanted it to focus on healthcare and how hard that access is. And because women dealing with healthcare, I knew abortion and you know, reproductive health was going to be a really important part of it. And so I wanted to find the place in America that would be the most difficult for a character to obtain an abortion. And it happened to be at the time this part of Northwest North Dakota. And once I said it there, it's like, okay, there's the oil booms happening there. There's an opiate crisis happening there. Like the ratio of men to women is like 4-to-1. You know, it's really a specific sort of Wild West sort of place. And so that informed so much of the film. You know, the genre, the characters that we meet, how the sisters interact with each other and engage with each other. The fact that it was, you know, a Black main character in a majority white place. That was all informed by the place, actually. So that's how it all kind of came together. Just having this one kernel of an idea, two women, poor rural America, and then it went from there.
And what was it like? Tessa has such an amazing performance. And what was it like working with Tessa?
Oh, it was amazing. It was so great. I mean, I got a little preview because we worked together at the Sundance Directors Lab, where I workshopped a couple of scenes from the script. And like, you're not really like supposed to do that thinking you're going to cast whatever actors come out to like workshop with you. But she just became the character, and I was like, oh, it has to be her. She's great. I love her dearly. Excellent actress, obviously, but also an amazing collaborator, incredibly intelligent, incredibly creative. And she really gives a shit. I mean, you can tell from everything that she's been doing, like she really gives a shit. So it was wonderful.
So what's really fascinating to me about Little Woods is it moves almost like it's a thriller, but it moves like a Western a little bit. Candyman is also sort of like decidedly a horror film and like social commentary a bit. It's also rumored that you're working on a big superhero Marvel film. Do you see genre work as a challenge or an opportunity, and how so?
Yeah, I think genre work is challenging in that it's not just about the truth. With genre, it also just has to be like effective. You have to kind of manipulate it. It's really psychological. You have to figure out like, the buttons and like figure out how to push buttons in the audience and whatnot. If it's a drama, like a straight drama, I kind of find straight drama I don't say it's not easy, but like the easiest because it's really just like, okay, who are my characters? What are the stakes? Like, let's be honest. Let's tell the truth, But genre is great because, one, people watch it. So it's usually, it's great just to have people watching your stuff because then the message, or if there is a message even, then whatever you're trying to say or, proliferates more, which is exciting. And it's an opportunity because more people see it, but also because I think people know what to expect when they go into a comedy or a horror film or a thriller. And so you can do two things. One, you can lull them into a sense of security while you, do your work, inside of the genre trappings. And then you can also surprise them in ways that are exciting and thrilling for them. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think that's why it's so exciting.
Do you see yourself drawn to any particular genre as an artist, or as a director, as a creative? Like, does one speak to you more than the other?
Not as a whole, but I do know, like, no matter what I do, I tend to want to have, like, a lot of tension and, like, thrillerish sort of elements to it. Not in everything that I've done, but for the most part, like, even if I'm doing, like, Little Woods is a Western, this is a horror film. I wrote like an adaptation of an Ibsen play. Like I was just like more thriller elements, like more like tension. And that's really something I really like doing.
So Nia, before we wrap up, I want to bring us back to the present moment for a second. You all set to have a huge summer release, and now Candyman is dropping next year. Many people are still kind of scared of going to the theater, getting sick in a crowded theater. I'm curious for you, how do you feel about releasing a movie during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's so. My ideal for the film is to come out in theaters when it's safe,
right.
And so we'll see when that is. But that's really what I want. I want people to be able to enjoy the film on the big screen, but when it's safe and when it makes sense.
So what lasting effect do you think the pandemic will have on the movie industry? Are you hopeful?
Oh, wow. People are so fatalistic about like theatrical distribution, whereas like theaters are dying, et cetera, et cetera. But I really think two things happen. One, we realize things that we don't have to do together, which is useful for workflow and that kind of thing. And I think also opens up to more people getting more opportunities. And then when it comes to like theatrical, I think a lot of what we learned during the pandemic is not just what we can do without having to be there, but also what we really would love to do together. And I think going to a theater is one of those things. So I think like people are going to always go see movies in theaters. And I think this is a moment where it's like, oh yeah, like I would love to have the opportunity to do that again. So what we're going to see in the immediate, I feel like, is a lot of things where it's like, oh, it's two characters in a house and they don't really have to be near each other. So that's the movie. A lot more TV, a lot more animated, a lot more animation, a lot more podcasts, like I think it's going to be things that people can do separately. Yeah. But at the same time, like, movies can't exist in that one space. So, when it's time and when things are right, I think things will bounce back. But I think we'll probably be safer and more efficient, if I'm being honest.
And then lastly, what impact do you want to have on society through your work and your art?
Oh, man. I mean, I said this from like Littlewoods times. Really just want to spread empathy and to present really full characters and people to the audiences who come to see my films. empathy, I think, is so important. And it's sort of like the secret backbone of society. It's not just like, oh, if you do something bad, you're going to end up in jail or whatever. It's also like, oh, I care about people I don't know anything about because we're both here. We're both alive. We're both humans in this community together. So empathy is a big thing for me.
I couldn't think of a better thing to end on. Thank you again so much, Nia, for speaking with me today. Thank you
for having me.
Coming out to WIRED25, and goodbye.
This is Van Jones. I'm a television host. I'm also an activist and a dad, and I'm very concerned about the country. We are at a turning point. We're either going to turn to each other or on each other. And we need to acknowledge what we're trying to do here in the United States of America is very, very tough. It's hard. You got every kind of human being ever born in one country. As with all hard things, there comes a time when you got to redouble your efforts to listen to each other and make any kind of progress.
All right, we're rehearsing sound. Everybody quiet on the set.
That's when I decided to begin working with Elijah Allen Blitz on a series of virtual reality experiences designed to create true empathy by putting the viewer in somebody else's shoes. I've always been a fan of Marvel Comics, and I felt like it was important to find superheroes who want to do good in real life. For our first episode, we partnered with Winston Duke from the film Black Panther. The episode puts you in the shoes of a 12-year-old African-American boy in the car with your dad, pulled over and harassed by the police.
I'm more interested in white America seeing it.
We wanted to make this available to as many people as possible.
I was a beach cop down in Delaware, so I got the police officer's perspective. Whenever we hear a story like this happens in the news, it's easy to say, at least from my perspective, safety first. Really gives you a really new perspective of sitting in that seat as a kid, watching dad getting pulled out, and you don't know what's going to happen next.
Now, we used first ever hand tracking technology that puts the viewer in the body of the person they might initially felt like they got nothing in common with. What these people were experiencing in 3.5 minutes, you could argue about for 3.5 days.
It's kind of shocking to see with your own eyes.
And a feel.
Yes, exactly.
Cut. For the second episode, we decided to focus on sexual harassment. And to do that, we partnered with Captain Marvel herself, Brie Larson.
I wanted to focus specifically on the restaurant industry as a way of insight into a larger systemic issue of power imbalances. Being able to participate in putting someone in that experience of seeing how even microaggressions can be really impactful, hurtful, and traumatizing to others, I think will help us to create safer, fair work environments for everyone.
We do have other episodes with other Marvel superheroes already lined up. Just a few decades ago, what we do every single day was considered impossible. But here we are, a miracle in human history, and we need tools to help us come together.
We're always told, like, live in someone else's shoes. There's a difference between living in someone else's shoes and seeing through someone else's eyes.
Hello, everybody. I'm Angela Watercutter, Senior Editor for Culture here at Wired. Thank you so much for joining us for WIRED25. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Van Jones, the founder, president of Magic Labs, the CEO of Reform Alliance, and CNN host and contributor, Elijah Allen Blitz, virtual reality director, and of course, actress, filmmaker, producer, and Captain Marvel herself, Brie Larson. Thank you guys so much for joining us. It's really great to have you.
Good to be here. Thank you for having us.
Great. So obviously we're talking about The Messy Truth, the VR experience, which actually is also nominated for an Emmy. I want to say congratulations to you guys for that. But first, Van, why don't you take us back a little bit? We got a little bit of a glimpse in the video we just saw of what The Messy Truth is. But, tell us a little bit about the history of it, kind of where this project came from and why you wanted to work on something like this.
Well, first of all, it's just a big honor to be here. I'm a Wired fanatic, so it's just good to be in this conversation. And, I am a part of an industry that some people say is tearing the country apart. Mainstream media, so-called corporate media. Some people say that the business model is making it more profitable to divide people and to bring people together. And I don't want to believe that's true, but I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can to use technology for good. Is there a way for us to use virtual reality and anything else to get people together? We just heard that incredible filmmaker was talking about empathy. And she talked about how empathy is this sort of, the backbone for human civilization. And I think that she's right. And, I was so sad about, after the Trump victory and all of just the pain and suffering and division and misunderstanding going on across the country. And as somebody who grew up in red state America, got a lot of love for red state America, raised my family on Blue Coast. And I just wanted, is there any way we could get people together? And then I got a chance to spend some time with Elijah. And Elijah is just a genius for bringing people together, finding solutions, using technology in innovative ways. And he said there's something called an empathy machine, virtual reality. It's just never been used, to really solve a social problem before. And I said, well, can we try? And he said, let's do it. And here we are with an Emmy nomination and mega stars like Brie Larson involved. And it's just an amazing experience.
Yeah, well, that tees it up perfectly. Elijah, tell me a little bit about, how you got involved in this and sort of what you wanted to do when, once you started working with Van on this project.
Oh, yeah. I mean, from the beginning, Van and I were actually working on something separate, but once Trump got elected, it was less than a week after the election, we got on the phone and just both agreed we need to do something. And we need to see if we can use the power of this technology to actually, instead of dividing us like all the stuff that we've seen happening over the last 4 years, to see if we can actually bring us together. So this has been beyond a labor of love. This is it's in a real way, it's a social experiment. And we're trying to see that if we can use this new medium in VR to actually, put you in the shoes of someone else, where you look down and you're fully embodied for these experiences in the, shoes of a different race or someone from a different gender, and to really see, like Van's saying, if this can be the ultimate empathy machine.
Yeah. And Brie, talk about your involvement. How did you come on board and what really made you want to work on something like this?
Elijah and I had a conversation about it. It was like the first conversation we ever had was about empathy. And when he was talking about this project, I was in the midst of working in Time's Up, and I was like, oh, we need to talk about tipped workers. It's a lot of what we're talking about with trying to put someone in someone else's shoes. I think one place that this really excels is dealing with power imbalance, because it's an experience that you have to, it's very hard to have if your body limits you and you've never been in that experience before. This gives you a never before experience. So we started talking with ROC and many women in the restaurant industry and collected a bunch of stories. It's important, I think, to say that this project is their true stories. So when you're going inside somebody else's experience, we're not fictionalizing this. We're just telling the truth and allowing you to sit in it and feel it for yourself.
Yeah. Well, and for all three of you, talk a little bit about that, because I think one of the great things about VR is that you can have an experience, a sort of first-person perspective experience on something that you maybe haven't been through, in your own life. But at the same time, it's so intimate to the point where it can be almost overwhelming. And so, how do you find that balance? And, how are you trying to reach that balance between creating empathy, but without sort of almost having a kind of traumatic experience or a kind of, like I said, overwhelming experience for viewers who are kind of doing some of these things for the first time?
We actually had to work really... Oh, go for it, man.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that, that was something we had to work really hard on. Was like Brie was saying, identifying these stories and making sure everything's true, but then also B, making sure that it wasn't something that could potentially traumatize the viewer. So it was the right mix, finding the right mix of, both of these different episodes that we've created so far have to give you an emotional connection where something happens that draws you in and connects you to what you're witnessing, but then also at the same time acknowledging the power of this medium where we're not going to give you an experience that could potentially traumatize you.
Yeah, and I think, just saying, the ethics, that Elijah brought to this, I think is really, really extraordinary. I mean, it'd be very easy to find a story that would be so shocking and, people would jump out of their seat and go home and cry or whatever, but that's not the point. What we're trying to do is find true stories. If you take a story like being a kid in a car with your parents, everybody's been there before. But when the lights start flashing behind you and you get pulled over and you're a black kid, you never forget that. Well, I walk around with that. Every black person walks around with that. If you're a white person, you've probably never had that experience. Or if you did, it worked out fine. It was officer friendly. You know, maybe she's giving you directions or something, or just giving you a warning, letting you go home. So we had to find an experience that would put you in that tension, put you in that moment of holy crap, like this is really going badly, but then not have it so bad that you're traumatized. And so it's people said, well, how can you find these stories? Listen, the stories are ubiquitous. There's so many stories of gender discrimination, sexual harassment, racial harassment. But how do you find one that's touching, that's moving, that doesn't traumatize people? That had to do with the ethics of the director, which is Elijah.
We actually had a viewer question. Thanks, Andrea. Wanted to know, I think from Brie specifically, how is it different working in VR versus working, in traditional film? What were the things that you kind of had to learn on the fly or learn on the spot? And, how did you kind of incorporate that into what you do?
Sure. So the thing with this particular piece is that it's one continuous scene, about 3 minutes long, right? Each one's about 3 minutes long. So it's like a play. There's no coverage. So if I mess up a line, you start from the beginning. If you want to try something in a different direction, it's a whole new take. And so the day is just, the beauty of it is you just need one take. And the other side of it is that it's just, you got to encapsulate it all in one go through. So it's more like, for this particular one, it's more like a play or doing a very short play than it is a traditional filming day. And the other piece is, as a producer on this, is you're thinking about the space. And I learned a lot from Elijah about that, about, where the camera's placed, where it is in a corner, for example, so that, because you want to look around and see, but then having a general focal point. So we work together from both of our backgrounds in order to kind of streamline this so that we're maximizing the impact within the experience.
Yeah. I think Van and maybe Elijah as well, we saw in the video that it looks like you took this to CPAC and actually, gave it to some people to try out. Talk a little bit about that experience, why you wanted to do it, and also, kind of what you walked away from that experience with.
Well, look, this is a part of my life. I am, strong Democrat, work for President Obama. I'm at CNN, I'm not at Fox. And yet I have found that when you really care about the people who are at the bottom, the people who are desperately poor or who are addicted or who are in prison or who have mental health issues, those folks, whether you're talking about Appalachia, the Hood, the Native American reservation, the border, they tend to have the same basic problems, about 80% overlap. Might have a little bit more racism here, a little bit more classism over there, but you've got the same basic problems. And neither political party, from my point of view, does enough to help the addicted, the afflicted, and the convicted. And so I've never been able to get a bill passed or get something done to help anybody where I didn't wind up working with Republicans and Democrats. So I'm bipartisan because I'm so passionate about my progressive values. And what we wanted to do was to take this experience to CPAC, take it to the biggest gathering of conservatives in this hemisphere, and just open our hearts up and say, here's what we've got to share with you. And we saw people taking off their MAGA hats, taking off their Make America Great hats, taking off their NRA hats, and putting on those visors. And as you saw in that video, 3.5 minutes later, saying, I didn't understand before. I didn't understand what it meant to be an African-American kid in a car getting pulled over by police officers with police dogs, et cetera. I just had never thought about it. And all we want is more understanding. We didn't go there to get them to change who they're going to vote for. I mean, it's democracy, you can vote for who you want to. That's the whole point. Dictatorship, you can only vote for one person. Democracy, you vote for who you want to. But we want people to vote with more understanding, and after the election to be able to have more understanding. And that's what I think we achieved a little bit at CPAC.
Yeah.
And there was. Okay. What were we going to say? Angela, you want to say something?
Go right ahead.
Just to answer just to elaborate on Van's point about CPAC. One of the guiding principles from the beginning of this project is something Van always says, that there's no throwaway people. And that goes across the entire board. And so when, showing up there, for me, that was my first time at CPAC for sure. And I definitely did not know what to expect. But what I was immediately hit by is that we all have so much more in common than not. And there was, like Van saying, there was, police officers that came and watched this experience, and they were just coming out and be like, I have a whole new perspective. And to be able to do that, to me, that's the goal of this project. It's not just to show people, that agree with our perspective already. It's not to preach to the choir. It's to go out there and try and connect with people. And, with Brie's episode, we plan to take that out as soon as, we can. Obviously, this is not the right time with the pandemic, but once we can go out there and share these different perspectives, showing people that might never get a chance to see this. That's really the whole mission behind this.
Yeah, I was gonna. There you go. Go ahead, Van. Yeah.
I just want to say, and also we plan on doing something about coal country, Appalachia, the opioid crisis, and take that to liberals, because liberals and progressives also have our blind spots and our assumptions and our lack of empathy, as much as we like to fly that empathy flag. So we got a lot of stories we want to tell.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say about the interesting thing with access in VR is that not a lot of people have headsets, so you do end up having instances where you have to be able to take VR out into the world and share it with people and let them sort of try these things on. And I'm kind of curious how obviously with coronavirus that's sort of impacted your ability to do that. But is that something that you definitely want to sort of double down and commit to once it's possible to bring these things out into the world again?
Yeah,
100%. That's our goal.
We talked too about the ideas for the future of this is that we could create curriculums. They could be larger ones, smaller ones. They could be ones tailored for schools, ones that are put in museums. And we've even talked about putting this in a van and being able to drive cross country and just put it on whoever we see. Obviously, these are all dreams for the future, not anywhere near. But this is about distributing the technology that we have, using the tools that we have. And these headsets are going to become, we think, much more available to people. And I think it's important that this option is there. There's, of course, going to be used for many different ways, but I think having this as an option is incredibly important. Yeah.
Van, I'm curious, you mentioned in the video that you wanted to work with Marvel superheroes, and obviously we have a Marvel superhero with us. Why was that? What were you kind of looking to do, with bringing in folks from that world into this one?
Well, I'm a super geek. Like these are people assume these books behind me are actually books. These are all graphic novels and stuff. Like I was a Marvel Comics geek when it was not cool. I was born in 1968, so I was reading this stuff. I remember when you had to be a true nerd to know who the X-Men were, to care about the Avengers, all that sort of stuff. So I grew up with that, and the ethics of, you hear me say ethics a lot, but ethics mean a lot to me. Stan Lee's vision of people having a lot of power, having a lot of responsibility, sticking up for the underdog, not giving up, not becoming what you're fighting. Villains act a certain way. We're not going to act that way. We're going to we're going to be better. All that stuff went into me very, very deep as a kid. And when I was a little nerd getting bullied and wedgied and pushed around or whatever, and then all of a sudden I'm 6'1+ and nobody's bullying me anymore, I wanted to use my law degree and whatever I had to help people. Then suddenly Marvel becomes like the global mythology for the 21st century civilization, and so you have these actual heroes that have been burned into the minds of 7 billion people. I said, geez, if these people actually decide they want to act heroically in the rest of the world, they can move the whole planet. And that's what we've seen. Winston Duke's performance, he was M'Baku in the Black Panther. His performance as a dad in this thing is unbelievable. The first one, Brie's performance in this thing is unbelievable. We've got others, Josh Brolin, Zoe Saldana, others who want to come in and do stuff. Listen, if Marvel wants to, if Marvel heroes or DC heroes, I'm a Marvel guy, but if DC heroes want to become heroic in the real world,
don't start a division with that, Van.
Exactly. I'm just saying, anybody, even DC and Marvel can get together for good.
Yes.
In VR. Well, Brie, talk a little bit about that. Where do you see sort of the overlap with working on a project like this, with your work in film and sort of being a hero in different ways and in different formats?
Sure. I'm just always looking for new ways to do the right thing. And this was one of them. So my interest in film was empathy. And for me, one of the things that I can tell with how far we're going with empathy is what films people are connecting with. And as we're seeing more diversity on film, it's exciting to me because I know what the experience is of watching a movie. You're becoming one with the person on the screen. It doesn't matter how many people you're watching the thing with. It's you alone, and you are on the edge of your seat, hopefully, with this person. You know, you are this person. So this is actually taking it a step further and just saying, hey, you're just going to be dropped into this body, and you're going to experience it from a first person's perspective. So when I heard about this project, it was so exciting because it's the thing that I've cared about and wanted to achieve. And I also am very limited in the roles and stories that I can play because of my body. And so this is a way to participate and continue to elevate and create more dialogue, more inclusion, and allow people to have experiences, because that's what this is all about. You know, this is what we need, is just more understanding. And I know that a lot of these words are sort of tired and overused, and we're saying things like this a lot, but it's so true. It's so true. I mean, we really have more that's alike than different, and so much of this hatred we have for one another, whatever you consider the other side, is based on a misunderstanding. And I think this is an incredible way that we can cut through that and say we're the same.
Yeah. Well, I was rewatching Avengers Endgame the other day, and I realized that Captain Marvel is actually kind of an intersectional feminist when you think about how she wants to save Earth, but also every other galaxy. So I think that is very true. Well, I'm curious, you talked a little bit about, welcome. Well, you were talking a bit about the things you have, kind of going forward. I'm wondering if anything in 2020 could, inspire anything in the future for something that you would want to do with a VR project.
Is that for me?
I wonder.
For anybody. Okay, yeah. Go ahead, Van.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny you ask that. I'm passionate about the immigration situation. The recent reporting that there may be the enforced hysterectomies against women in refugee camps and immigration detention is unbelievable to me. I know Zoe Saldana has mentioned that she wants to do something about immigration. I'm passionate about what's going on in Appalachia. I'm from Tennessee. It's not a foreign country to me. But I haven't thought about the particularities of 2020. But in some ways, we were prescient because the situation with George Floyd and the whole Black Lives Matter uprising maps right onto what we did with the first one. Certainly, Time's Up and all of that maps onto what we did with the second one. But there'll be many, many more. For me, the most important thing I can say is that it's okay for us to disagree with each other. That's not a problem. We can vote against each other. We can march against each other. But we need to understand each other. Listen, if you and I disagree, but I at least understand where you're coming from, we can still be neighbors. We can still be, in the same country together. If you are a complete mystery to me, if I have no idea where the hell you're coming from, and we don't agree, we got a problem. And right now, technology, these algorithms, once the algorithm knows, once your phone knows you're a liberal, it's only going to show you liberal content, I promise. Once they know you're conservative, it's only going to be conservative. And so you think you're programming your phone is programming you. And we've got to start using technology in a different way, not because we should never vote against each other, but because we should never vote against each other and hate each other. And that's where we're headed right now. I'm very concerned about it.
Yeah. Well, I think we have time for one question, and it wouldn't be Wired if I didn't ask Brie. Do you know what's happening with Captain Marvel 2? Are you excited to get back into it?
Oh my God, Van is so excited about this question. I am so excited to talk about that movie at a time when Marvel's not going to kill me to talk about it. So I'm going to pivot real quick and say, in response to your question before, there's infinite stories to tell. And we've talked about positive stories as well, moments of kindness, moments of compassion, moments of, when you're getting help from a stranger, disability episodes. I just think that there's just as many people as there are on the planet. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a moment that should be shared and experienced. And so we're excited to collect more and do more. And we hope that the more we talk about it, the more we get it out there, hopefully there's people out there in the world that are like, that looks cool. We can, we'll help you. Because that's what we need right now. We just need help to keep pushing the project forward.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really love this conversation, and thank you for coming to WIRED25. Yeah, have a wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so
Angela.
much.
See you later.
Bye.
Well, that was a fabulous day, and it ended on just the right note. And it was an extraordinary set of conversations that were linked together in ways that surprised me and probably struck all of you while we watched. There was, I thought, a theme of people kind of going outside the boundaries of what you might expect them to do, whether it's as a UX designer or as a chef or as a filmmaker, and looking at broader questions in society and then using one's role in that position to do something bigger. And of course, the big theme of the day was something Van Jones brought up at the end of that conversation, which is empathy. And that was the core of Reid Hastings in our conversation about how Netflix works across cultures and what the point of Netflix is, right? It was what the ghetto gastro people were talking about as we talk about the importance of understanding food, understanding the people who make it, understanding what it means. It's how we think about how horror films can help us see people we may not see, understand people in ways we may not have understood. And so that's the real theme of today, how empathy can help us connect, understand, and get closer to each other in a world that sometimes pulls us apart. So thank you so much for sticking through it. Thank you to all of our fabulous moderators, all of our superheroes who attended, everybody who put it together. Thank you to Samsung. Thank you to Vonage for supporting this. And very importantly, remember, this is not the end of WIRED25. It is day one, and we're going to be going on for the next 2 weeks. The next one will be Wednesday, September 23rd at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll be talking again about some of the intense issues in our society. We will have a segment we're putting together on the fires sweeping the West. Dee and Steve Allen and Isla Myers-Smith, scientists documenting the climate crisis, will be there. Sarah Fryer, the CEO of Nextdoor, a key shelter-in-place lifeline during the pandemic, will be talking with us, as will Arlen Hamilton and Katie Ray, both venture capitalists investing in underrepresented entrepreneurs, capital-intensive tough tech, which is problems that are really important and hard to solve. And we'll have Maria Ressa. She's the CEO and executive editor of the news site The Rappler, and a hero for a lot of us in journalism for standing up to authoritarianism and reminding us why her profession, our profession, matters so much for the world. After all those talks, we're going to do some deeper dives with the speakers. You'll have meetups after the program at 1:45 p.m. Eastern, so stay tuned for those. They'll be announced on Monday. Registered attendees will be able to pick the ones they want to go to. So thank you. Thank you for coming to our first virtual WIRED25. It was an experiment for us, for you, but I loved it, and I hope you did too. See you at the next one.